Welcome back, everybody. The Open Peace Podcast. First, I want to apologize for missing a couple of weeks there. We've been having, a lot of people are doing things in their personal lives. It becomes harder to schedule. Plus, a bit difficult to always find guests. So, we've been slipping. That's on us. We're gonna try to do better. Today, it's just gonna be me and Amir. And considering the lack of guests, we thought, Israel's crazy enough. We could just talk about all the crazy drama that's going on in our government and our politicians and just all the basically unacceptable stuff they're doing.
There's plenty of that going on, Jared. There's plenty of that at the moment. And to be honest, I sometimes flick through when I'm watching TV and I put on Arutz Knesset, which is the
Knesset channel.
The Knesset channel. And sometimes I'm just disgraced by the dialogue itself and the attacks, the personal attacks that go on there, and the lack of respect there are for other members of parliament who maybe have differing views to each other. The whole point of government, is to have differing sides and then come to some type of consensus and agreement. And unfortunately, our politicians here haven't quite clocked onto that. Do you want to go through some of the things that have been happening recently with Benny and Bibi?
Yeah, that's the first thing I wanted to bring up is basically Netanyahu's acting like a child, like an actual child. What is it? Let me find the quote. Well, first thing I want to talk about is there was like this dinner. It was like an official government function or something, and Netanyahu, who is now the head of the opposition, so of course he has the right to speak at these things. He thanked everybody there, but specifically snubbed Bennett. And when he did mention Bennett, he did nothing but throw shade at the current prime minister. And people in the audience of this thing actually booed him and started shouting, "There's a prime minister here," at Netanyahu. I mean, dude, you lost the election. Get over it. There was also another event where on the plenum, in the middle of Knesset, in the middle of debate, actual government time, he took time to tell a story about how, when I was a child, I pretended to be a pilot, but I wasn't a pilot. But since I was a kid, it was cute. Bennett is pretending to be a pilot right now, but it's not cute. And, what the heck? I don't, how is that an efficient use of your time? Of our time? We elected you to pass laws, not to throw a hissy fit on the goddamn plenum of the Knesset. Yeah. You're in parliament. Have some dignity, man.
Well, do you know what I think it is, Jared? I personally think it's pandering to his own crowd. And that's what he's looking to do. He's looking to put a smile on the face of a few of his loyal supporters by having a cheap dig at Bennett. And it's just, it really is ridiculous, considering the amount of problems that we have in this country. For them to be focused on little personal snipes and digs and attacks, instead of actually looking at the issues that we have down south, up north, with the infrastructure, with the Palestinians, with international relations. I just find it really ridiculous. I wish things would change. What do you think we can do as citizens to try and change the dialogue and get politicians to actually do what they're supposed to do and work for the people instead of their own good?
Yeah. Well, first off, as citizens, the most effective thing we can do is vote. That's literally how we change things. If you're not cool with the way the head of the opposition is acting, don't vote for his party. Vote for another party. They can be head of opposition or possibly prime minister. Really, the only way to really shut Netanyahu up is to not vote for him in the next election. So unfortunately, this is the way he's going to act until we go to the polls again. That's just pretty much what it's going to be, because he is the largest faction in the Knesset right now, his Likud party. So the only way to make him stop is to not make him the largest one, make him number 2 or number 3. But I mean, from what I've been hearing, there's a lot of anger to how Netanyahu's been acting, and I mean, and I say this as somebody who does not like Bennett at all. I do not like his policies, do not like his party or his platform.
Mm-hmm.
He's been acting very dignified as prime minister since he became. It seems to me like he really understands what his premiership is about. He knows that like he's not like the biggest guy in parliament. He's there to just hold it together so the country can move on. You know, and I respect that on a certain degree. And Netanyahu's job right now is basically a toddler looking at a Jenga tower trying to knock it down. And that's, and I don't know. I mean, like, I guess the head of the opposition is supposed to challenge the government, but you're not supposed to collapse it. That's not what you're supposed to do.
But then again, isn't that in his interest to collapse the government? Because then he could potentially get back in, and Likud could get voted back in, and so maybe that is actually what he wants.
It probably is what he wants, but the thing, I think the man's delusional. We went through 2 years of back-to-back elections, and he could not get enough votes within his bloc to form a government. Mm-hmm. If Netanyahu, like, I really think the man's delusional. He thinks he can form a government. Right now, no, he can't. He's toxic. If he gets as close as he was before he left office, we're going right back to that crisis.
Yeah. No, I completely agree, Jared. I completely agree. I think he should just retire from politics and go live off his huge pension, which I'm sure he has, and all the properties he's acquired.
He doesn't have like 3 mansions in a country that's starved of land.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I don't know how he has as many supporters as he does. Unfortunately, some of the electorate here can be, misled, and the fact that he speaks decent English, and he can give a speech at the UN, which sounds good to English speaking ears.
Well, I mean,
seems to do the trick for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, he went to school in Philadelphia, I believe. He went to university there, and he lived in Philadelphia for a long time. So it just makes sense that he speaks English. He has a very decent accent too.
Yeah. No,
I think he plays up the Israeli accent. I've heard him speak as a younger man, and he has like a really good American accent. I think he plays up the accent.
I see. I did want to touch on a few other issues going on within government. There was also a big scandal to do with Elazar Stern, who is a member of parliament for the Yesh Atid party, Yair Lapid's party. And he basically got caught backtracking on statements to do with his time spent in high command of in the army. And basically what happened was he was accused of shredding documents which were handed in by females on the base complaining about other senior officers on the base. So he basically, hid some of these things. And this was while he was trying to become head of the Jewish agency. So, this guy, I don't personally know too much about him. But just hearing that, it sounds ridiculous. And it's obviously very good that he's now out of the running for that position.
Of course.
It's just unfortunate that these type of people are the ones that are getting in there and, running the country and taking huge, big checks home off the taxpayers' money while, critical things like infrastructure are not being dealt with. Education not being dealt with. We've been sliding down the ranks with regards to education, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, like when I was in high school, Israel was like was really high up there. It was like in the top 20 worldwide. Now we're in like what, 34? Something like that.
Ridiculous.
It's like I can't believe that huge drop. Anyway, Lokman Yunus Singh Ujin, yeah. Come watch it later. We'll still be here. It'll be up. So we appreciate the like. What was the other point I was going to make? Oh, yeah, about Elazar. Hopefully, Yesh Atid will remove him from the party. Like, they can do that. They can pressure a member of their party to step down and then fill that seat with somebody else who is further down the list. And I hope they do that. But it just goes to show you have to be wary and careful of everybody you vote for. It's like it's like character is important, and you shouldn't just look at the things they say. You also have to look at how they act and what they do, And
For sure.
in certain cases like this, it's a real disgrace. I mean, he hid like reports of sexual harassment, essentially.
Yeah.
In the army, and got rid of those reports. Like, you can't do that. When Israel goes to war, our women come with us. They're half of the nation. We can't be leaving them behind like this. We need them. Yeah. If you hurt our daughters, you hurt our sons.
Exactly, Jared. And I think you're spot on. Yesha teacher, definitely get rid of him. Yeah. Get somebody in who's actually competent and has some good morals about themselves, and I think that could help. I am wondering how Lapid is being viewed at the moment. He seems to be flying to a lot of places, going to Morocco and going to Bahrain and going to all these places, which I think is great. One thing that did come out of the last government was these Abraham Accords, obviously with the UAE, Bahrain, Sudan and Morocco. So it is definitely something that needs to be progressed year by year, and maybe hopefully adding a few more countries into that list.
Yeah, hopefully we can add the Palestinians to that, or maybe its own agreement. Because I wanted to bring that up because I was thinking about this earlier today, is that people look at Netanyahu as if he was such a good prime minister. Really, what did he do? How long? He was in office for what, 11 years? 10?
It was 11, 12 years.
Yeah, 11, 12 years. What changed? What did he do? We had war after war after war after war after war, and never any assurance that the next one wasn't going to come. Right? You signed the Abraham Accords with a country way over there, doesn't border us, has never actually fired anything at us, so we've never been to war with, just never had any relations with. Meanwhile, the peace process has just been nothing happened, just not even interested.
Sure, even more than that, Jared. Even more than that. I mean, we've seen the worst, the fighting. Obviously, you can check out our podcast to do with the war that happened earlier in May. We saw things during that war that we've never seen. We saw lynchings on the streets of our major cities. We saw some really horrific things, and that's under his watch. This is up to him. That's on him. And when he's still out there, giving it the big one, trying to take the Mickey out of Bennett, it's ridiculous. He really just needs to step down from public life.
You're not even Mr. Security. When you fail to stop the wars, you're not Mr. Security. You're just a failed prime minister.
Yeah.
His premiership was a failure.
Completely agree. But I did want to address something else that's going on as well recently. There's the investigation into what happened up in Har Meron. So if our viewers aren't aware, there was a tragedy a few months ago up on Har Meron, which is the Meron Mountain, which is the site of Harashbi. It's his grave site, and every year lots of pilgrims go up there and celebrate. And what actually happened there was, it was basically a crushing event, a stampede, where many people died, many people were injured, and the investigation for it is going on at the moment. Now, Jared, how do you feel about what's going on? Because I feel like nobody has been blamed for this. Nobody has been fired from their positions of power. And I really do hope this investigation gets down to the bottom of things, and the people responsible for what happened up there are punished accordingly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, I don't know all that much information about it. I hadn't heard about this until you told me. I've kind of been disconnected, a little bit recently. I've only heard about the big stuff, or just what comes up in the American media, because I've recently moved back to the States. But honestly, if anything happens, I could just go with the most basic answer. If there's an investigation, it should be allowed to happen. It should go through fully, and people who have done wrong should face consequences for that. Well, of course, that's just how it's supposed to work in any civilized country. especially for such an important site. You can't let that go unpunished.
Yeah, no, definitely. And the craziest thing is that the warning signs had been there for years. People had made officials aware of the situation, aware of the overcrowdedness, aware of the lack of facilities, yet nothing was done. Year after year after year, the problem wasn't taken care of, and it's just such a shame. It's just a loss of life, which is inconceivable, really. In modern day Israel, 2021, for tens of people to be killed in a stampede at a religious event is,
which honestly is like the most shocking part about it, because like Israel, especially when it comes to like Jewish religious stuff, is very good at making things are up to date and well taken care of. Which honestly, I think that just goes to show with the larger problem of the kind of chaos our government's been in. They can't afford, like they don't have the time to look at this stuff when everything around them is collapsing, or when you had a dude at the helm who was more concerned with keeping the office rather than like actually doing the paperwork that lands on his desk. Like, because like this is a part of it. I mean, hell, like the religious parties are a part of his coalition. How is this not taken care of beforehand? Like,
I think it's pure incompetence. To be honest with you, it's just pure incompetence, laziness, lack of any want to do anything, and unfortunately, people paid in blood, and it has to stop. And what happened in Mount Meron, Har Meron, is just another example for day-to-day things that happen here in Israel. Maybe people aren't aware, but there's many accidents here that happen all the time. If that's car accidents, I drive, I'm on the roads a lot. Every other day, there's somebody either being killed in a motorcycle accident or in a pileup. It's really dangerous on the roads. How many more people have to die on the roads before something is done about it? How many more people have to get in accidents and severely injured before we make our roads safer? It really boggles the mind. It boggles the mind.
I mean, when it comes to roads, though, I think that's just more an aspect of culture. How the Israelis themselves drive. Because I mean, the government, I don't see much that the government can do other than have police literally everywhere enforcing the laws, like all the time. Like in other countries, like in America, people still follow the rules, and we don't have as many accidents, per capita.
Well, I disagree with you a little bit on that, Jared, because I think that the government can do more. There was recently an accident up north involving a bus and a taxi. And one of the drivers there had like 50 offenses against them, and the person's still on the road. So that's up to the government to make sure that person is not on the road, correct? We need to be enforcing the laws. If someone is known to be a danger on the road, get them off the road and only let them back on once they've had sufficient driving tests and skills and to get them back on there, because it can't be, it's not possible for this country to continue to operate when every day there's another car crash here, there's another car crash there, there's another car crash. I can tell you sometimes, Jared, to get from where I am, which is usually a 20-minute, 25-minute drive to Tel Aviv, it can take an hour and a half, 2 hours because of these accidents, because of the lack of infrastructure. So I do think it's up to the government and the powers that be to step their game up. There's also a lot of roads and infrastructure which needs, severe replacing. Some of the roads in the Negev that I drove on, you remember when we drove down for the meteor shower? Some of those roads are so dangerous. They are so dangerous, it won't take too much.
Potholes everywhere, a bunch of places like right near cliffs that don't have rails.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Sometimes it feels like laws in Israel are only enforced when an order comes from the top. Otherwise, people are just content to just drive around in their police cars. That's what it feels like.
Yeah. There are incidents where, you know, the police can be also praised, you know, with regards to serious crimes, serious violent crimes, the escape from prison, even though that was a huge, you know, mess up at the start, they did manage to get all the 6 within, I think it was within 3 weeks or a month. They managed to get
something like that. It wasn't too long before they found them.
Yeah, you know.
I mean, like, but like those are like big, serious things. Like, you can't only have enforcement of the law when it comes to the big things. You know, we need positive, like, peace in people's lives. Like, it has to be like the very small things enforced day to day, like health standards, just maintenance on the roads, just like enforcement of traffic laws, basic stuff like when to turn at an intersection, which I get Israelis, it's hard to do. That's why we have roundabouts now. But look before you turn. It's not that difficult. Just that.
Yeah.
It's not. Because I mean, also, like the amount of times I've almost been hit at an intersection, it's not even funny for someone who has a grim sense of humor as me. It's not even funny anymore.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, Jared. I completely agree. I'm somebody who usually, you know, very much enjoys driving, and it's something that can be pleasurable. But unfortunately, on many of the roads here in Israel, it's not a pleasurable thing to do. You feel like you're battling with people on a day-to-day basis, when it should just be a smooth ride to work or to the gym or whatever leisure activity you're going to do. One of the things we did talk a little bit about the police, and I did praise them for managing to round up the prisoners that escaped. However, I must also criticize them big time. And, you know, this is to do with the amount of violence within the Arab sector of Israel at the moment is sky high. We're talking about unheard of levels of violence, shootings, killings, kidnappings. And I haven't heard of enough arrests and people being punished for their criminal activities. And for me, I just think it's a disgrace. It really is. It's getting to a level where I'm seeing the images on the news. I'm seeing the things going on down south and up north. And I'm just thinking to myself, this is unsustainable. I mean, you have literal gangs of people with military grade weapons stashed at home. And every day there's another killing. There was just a young man was just hit by a stray bullet up north. He'd just been married 1 month ago, married, and he catches a stray bullet and dead. The poor family. My condolences go out to them.
From all of us. I mean, policing in the Arab sector has always been a weird issue in Israel. You know, I mean, like, first off, like, part of it comes from apathy on the Jewish side. How, like, oh, we don't want to, you know, spend money in the Arab sectors because of stupid racist reasons. And then there's also that in a lot of Arab communities, they're pretty resistant to the police showing up. You know, so like there's multiple factors here that just make it difficult. And honestly, it takes more than just sending police into these communities. It takes a lot of outreach from the state to these communities. You know, like a lot of overtures trying to show them like, yeah, you can trust us. You're a part of this country. You know, we want to represent you. Show us how can we do that, and like do their best to like fund these communities better as just like a sign of, you know, we care. And then maybe we can send in more police. But it's unfortunately just sending in more police into these areas isn't really the answer, because all you're going to get is probably riots.
Well, I think you're partially right and you're partially wrong as well at the same time. I mean, I can tell you that a couple of years ago, I drove to my kibbutz and I went through the Bedouin city, the largest Bedouin city in the south called Rahat. And the day I drove through, there was actually a protest against the violence that is going on within the sector. and you had signs both in Hebrew and Arabic asking for more of a police presence, asking for them to clean up the streets. Yeah. Obviously, there are communities where it's a lot more problematic, like you said.
Yeah, like al-Fakhm is the main one that everyone thinks of.
Sure. But even there, I can tell you that, you know, if the police were behaving in a correct way and doing their job to the highest standards, I don't think they'd have any problem even working within those communities. At the end of the day, it's them who suffer from the levels of violence, the shootings, and I think you do have to take it as a huge challenge over the next few years, and it's up to Bennett and Lapid's government to tackle this issue, and they need to put in a plan in place that will reduce the levels of violence radically, because that's basically what's needed. And you're going to have a cleanup of illegal weapons that are out there, because at the moment I've even heard it's easier to get a gun than order a pizza in certain places. You know,
you're not
ridiculous.
wrong on that one.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Honestly, in certain towns, you could probably just find a stash hidden somewhere in a hole. Has Bennett said anything about this? Because I imagine Lapid would only talk about this if someone forced his hand. Bennett, I imagine, would purposefully ignore it.
Yeah, so I haven't actually heard any of the new government speaking about this issue. That may be that I've missed it, and they are trying to address it. I know down south there are a few things going on there with regards.
Well, I mean, of course, with the South, like the Arab Party is a conservative Bedouin party. That's part of the coalition for the first time. So, like, of course, things are going to happen down south. But like me as a northerner, like I want to see progress up there. But unfortunately, I think there's more resistance in those communities rather than the Bedouin communities. 'Cause, I mean, Bedouins are more their own thing. The Arabs of the north, a lot of times they'll just say they're Palestinian, and then that becomes part of that whole thing.
Sure.
Needs to be more outreach up there.
Definitely. There needs to be more outreach, and like we said, there needs to be a long-term plan to deal with these issues. I can just give an example of you know, good planning and good police working, which is in Glasgow City. Glasgow City in Scotland used to be very, very violent, full of murders, stabbings. It was really a tough place to live and very violent. And in the space of a few years, they managed to change the direction of the city and where it was going, and they managed to reduce crime radically over there. So I do think it can be done here. It's just we're going to have to allocate the funds. We're going to have to hire the right staff to address the issues that we have in each community. So if that's more police, if that's more social workers, if that's even psychologists to deal with the trauma that people are going through from the levels of violence that they're seeing.
Yeah. Well, you know, just as an example, New York, in the 70s, as everybody in America knows, and probably overseas too, New York in the 70s was basically a dystopia. It was terrible there. And like crime there after the 70s, like in the 80s, it started to drop. In the 90s, it really started to drop. And now New York is really one of the safest places in the country. And a lot of people will push back against that because, you know, big city, ooh, scary. But honestly, it has a lower crime rate than even like a lot of small towns in the area. Like, and I mean, part of that is because the city stopped just going with like hardline enforcement of the law, just going in with police and just doing like going like guns blazing to solve crime. There was more city funding for places like daycare centers, for education, more space given to schools, basically just more investing in the general population. That just tends to bring down crime rates. Like, yeah, police are part of it, but you have to give people a reason to not do crime. Because if you give people ways to like live their lives that are within the law, they'll do that. You know, it's like if you have to steal and rob just to eat, you're gonna do that. Like, if you have to leave your kid alone in a hot car because you have to go do your job, which probably pays very freaking little, and you can't get a daycare.
Sorry, Neo. I'm sorry.
Who's yelling? Hi, Jaden.
No, but I agree with you, Jared. I agree that the money needs to be invested in localities and in things that will definitely benefit people living there. One of the things, me being from down south originally, the unrecognized Bedouin villages around the Negev. This is a huge issue that is close to my heart. And again, it's government, it's simply lackadaisical incompetence, really, with regards to how the Bedouin have been treated and how they continue to be treated. And the fact that we have citizens living in more or less third world conditions without basic amenities and facilities, and nothing is being done about it. And this isn't just Bibi's government's fault. It's the government before that and the government before that and this one. It's all of them together. It's basically
the state's fault.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we're going to need some brave leaders to come in and to challenge the status quo and really come to some type of compromise and arrangement in where certain villages are recognized and certain families or people living in certain areas are moved to permanent housing in other cities or in some of the newly recognized places. And I think one of the other things that can really, really help is bring more job opportunities and facilities to those areas. So for example, down south, we have some of the best weather in Israel, and we have lots of land for agriculture. Why not get the Bedouins involved in agriculture and in helping that sector and give them enough investment and enough funds to help them grow from there and really push on.
Yeah, I mean, legit, that solves a lot of problems right there. Is government grants for vocational training.
Yeah, definitely.
Or even land grants. I mean, hell, the state owns 90% of all the land in the country.
Something like that.
We can make some money selling some of that farmland off to say impoverished communities, so that way they can improve themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, the state wants to hold on to it. And then there's the JNF, which only sells to Jews, and the court keeps fining them every time they refuse to sell to a non-Jew, yet they just keep paying the fines, which is a whole nother issue.
Yeah, completely, Jared. So I do think it's also up to us, right? Because we can't just expect the government to pull their finger out and do the things that we want them to do. I think it's also up to us to challenge them, to push them into and submit them into doing certain things for the benefit of the people. I can just give an example, opposite my kibbutz, like I said, is Rahat, the Bedouin city. And for years, people campaigned to put in a roundabout there. Why did it take years and years and years and years of protests and of asking the local municipality to put in a roundabout? Putting in a roundabout is not a big deal.
Yeah.
And it's a lifesaver at the end of the day, these things, So it is also up to us to put pressure on our local municipalities, on our local MPs to get things done. Unfortunately,
that's part of the issue. We don't have local MPs.
I'm talking about your local municipality leaders.
Oh, okay, municipality.
Yes.
Yeah, that's something else. We can't put pressure on them. That's I think that's a huge flaw in the way our system works over there as well. Everyone's our MK. Nobody represents us specifically.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah, like if we had a Knesset, in my city of Haifa, if we had some Knesset members that are specifically represented the Haifa district, I'd be writing them all the time. Be like, yo, y'all need to fix this. There's a pothole right here, and dude, I'd be writing all the time. But you can't you can't do that in Israel to like fix government issues. You mainly like the only time you get to do that is if you like happen to run into a party leader on the street. It's like the only time, like the only way you can. Yeah, like you need to campaign. You need to set up a huge protest because you have to get the party leader's attention.
Yeah, it's a ridiculous system, to be honest. One of the other things that I find, very, very strange is that a lot of the people that are in certain positions, the health minister, the education minister, they don't have any clue or any background in what they're the minister of.
I mean, just politicians.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think the health minister should be somebody who's run a hospital or somebody who's been a doctor for 20, 30 odd years. Somebody who's education minister should have a long career in academia and not just some politician that people voted for and yalla, you're the education minister. The energy minister, we need somebody who's maybe, worked for energy company. Yeah. You want to be, I just don't get it. I just don't get how we don't have that. And it boggles my mind, actually. It boggles my mind. The level of incompetency within government really does boggle my mind.
It's honestly like we just need like a complete reform of the way the state works. I mean, like the current government system we have in Israel wasn't even meant to be how it's supposed to be forever. Like when the first elections in Israel happened after the War of Independence, or the 48 War, for anyone else who is on that side of the line, they were supposed to write a constitution. Ben-Gurion promised us a constitution. They never delivered it. And we've been stuck with this provisional system, and we just went, let's just make it work. And I mean, it keeps the country from falling apart, barely. But we need a constitution. We need a new system. We need a better way of electing our representatives. Honestly, I think we should get like another chamber in the Knesset. And you know what? If we want to keep it up with the Jewish stuff, we could call like the upper chamber the Sanhedrin, and those could be our local representatiants.
I like that. Yeah. And does the local representative have to be from that community, correct?
Yes. Yeah. That has to reside in that community for like in America, if you want to run for a specific seat, you have to have resided in that district for what is it, like 2 years? Ima, is it like you have to live in a district for like 2 years before you can run to represent that district in Congress?
I know you have to be a resident, but I'm not sure if there's a timeline.
Isn't that like for Senate though? Because I know there's like a timeline somewhere.
Yeah, but I don't know, because you could be an ombudsman and live outside your district.
That's true. Yeah, but that's ombudsman. I'm talking about like for national. Anyway, thanks, Mom. Yeah. So I would say honestly, if I was doing it, I would have the Knesset be what it is. I would put in an upper house called the Sanhedrin, filled with local representatives, and in order to represent a district, you would have to live there for at least a year. I would say, live there for at least a year and continue to live there. Secondly, I would put more power into the president and have him choose the cabinet.
How would that help? How would that help?
First off, because the way it currently works, the prime minister is, the end-all, be-all of everything. President has no power. And in order for a person to become prime minister, he basically has to promise cabinet positions to other parties to become leaders. Meanwhile, if we put more power into the president, into running the country, basically make him a true executive, similar but not as strong as we have here in the States, then he can choose the cabinet and choose people who are actually, experts in that field. You ran a power plant, president can make you minister of energy. You have some experience running schools or maybe have been a member of academia, president can make you minister for education. Like stuff like that, because the way with how the prime minister gets chosen, part of that is because he's so powerful. He ends up just choosing other politicians to hold himself up in that position. Meanwhile, if we just have direct elections from the people for president, and then have the president choose the cabinet, and the prime minister can still do the day-to-day running of the country as, a prime minister is supposed to do. I just think it would make things a whole lot quicker, like real separation of powers. Clearly delineating things so that way we can have it be done as efficiently as possible. Like, you do this, you do this, you do this. Nobody does anybody else's job. Meanwhile, we have a prime minister who is essentially both president and prime minister.
I see what you mean. I get your point. I think, we could definitely trial that out and see how it works. I think it would definitely, like you said, separate the power out a little bit and maybe, have more of a focused entity on certain issues. Because I do think that one of the major problems here is that we addressed it a little bit earlier. Things only seem to get done after something horrible has happened, after a Meron disaster, after a war, after a car accident. And if we had the right people in place from the start, I think we could avoid some of these horrific things that seem to happen, unfortunately, for such a small country, very regularly. Something that also really, really gets on my nerves, Jared, is the amount of accidents in the building sector. For a small country, Israel has a very, very high number of accidents on building sites. Now, of course, building sites are a dangerous place. Accidents do happen, but there are things like laws, health and safety, things that can be put in place to address 80-90% of the risk. Of course, there will still always be risk involved and things can happen. But if we had more health and safety officers, if we had better laws and legislations with regards to health and safety in that sector, it would save lives, full stop. Full stop.
I imagine, like, health and safety, the number of health and safety inspectors for construction sites would definitely be under the purview of whoever is Minister of Infrastructure or Minister of Housing. So, which is partly why we don't need a politician in there. We need, I'd say, an architect or somebody who's worked at a construction company.
Yeah, somebody a contractor. Somebody who's been a contractor for 30 odd years and knows what to do on a building site.
Yeah,
knows how to take care of health and safety.
Yeah, like, instead of just a politician who is given it. Like our current foreign minister is Yair Lapid. Honestly, I think a career diplomat should have been the man who got that job. I mean, like, not Lapid. I mean, he seems to be doing all right so far, but I mean, still, imagine how much better it would be if we had somebody whose whole life he's been an ambassador.
Sure.
It's just
sure. I think that would be a great idea. How do you see Lapid really as a foreign minister? I mean, I haven't seen too much. I just seem to see him flying from place to place and making visits.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the basics of what a foreign minister is supposed to be. He's supposed to represent Israel and basically just improve relations with other countries, which I see him doing. Like, that's like what he's doing, jetting around from place to place. He's talking with everybody. He's setting things up. But I think part of the reason why he's jetting around so much is because everybody knows he's not only foreign minister, he's also essentially another prime minister. Because, I mean, he already holds the title of alternate PM. And if this coalition lasts, like, another year and a half, he will be prime minister.
Yeah. Exactly.
And so he has a lot more weight behind him than a normal foreign minister. And I think part of it is that, like, he's not just the foreign minister, he's also essentially acting as head of state or head of government in these situations, which is kind of which is really useful when you're building up foreign relations, which is something Israel really needs.
Well, didn't I might be mistaken here, Joe, but correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't Rabin and Peres also have a very similar thing going on back in the day with, like, a joint premiership?
It wasn't Rabin and Peres because they were in the same party. It was Peres and Shamir.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, Shamir the Likudnik, and No, or was it Perez and Rabin? No, it was Perez and Rabin, the two dudes named Yitzhak.
Yeah, I thought it was.
Yeah, it was another situation like that where Shamir was prime minister. The election was too close, and they signed a coalition deal making Rabin alternate prime minister, and it was that for a little bit. And then Rabin won the next election or something like that, and then he just became outright prime minister. Yeah, this isn't the first time we've had a situation like this.
Yeah. I do want to leave our viewers on a few positive notes. I know we've been quite critical today, obviously, of the government and of certain issues going on here. But I think it's very important to actually progress the status quo and to get things to change. You need to be highly critical of what's going on and address the issues one by one. But I do also want to say a few good words because I have heard a few good things coming out of the new government. So one of the things is I've heard the increasing the amount of work permits coming in from Gaza, which is huge. I mean, for our viewers, just to put it into perspective for you guys, Gaza is crime-ridden, unemployed, basically 40 to 50% unemployment over there, blockaded in, run by a terrorist group with other terrorist groups in there. It's a really not nice place to be and a tough place to be. So allowing more Gazans to come over the border and work and earn a decent wage and go back there and be able to feed their families is, for me, it's vital. It's vital for Israel, and it's vital for the people of Gaza as well.
I mean, of course. I mean, like honestly, we've tried multiple times just going into Gaza to try to dislodge Hamas. It doesn't work. It's not going to work that way. I think the only way we can get rid of Hamas as an actual threat is to have the people of Gaza get rid of them for us. And the only way the people of Gaza are going to want to do that is if we do what we can to make their lives better.
Exactly.
More
hit the
work
nail on the head,
permits,
Jared.
better pay, more like loosening up of the blockade to allow certain things in, like more food, more. I was going to say electronics, but electronics can be used for explosives. Yeah. Either way, but the basics: more water, more power. Like honestly, the way the government kind of uses that as a tool to threaten Hamas with, like, we'll just shut off your power. Like, that doesn't hurt just Hamas.
Exactly. It's collective punishment, and it doesn't do Israel any good at the end of the day. I think there has to be a type of roadmap towards, opening up the blockade, getting rid of the blockade, allowing Gazans to breathe and to live like anyone else. I just think it's such a sad state of affairs, and to be honest, we talked about the situation down south with the incompetency of the government dealing with the Bedouin situation, the unrecognized villages. So again, it's incompetency with regards to Gaza. Israel withdrew to Gaza back in 2005-06. And since then, basically, after the takeover 2007 of Hamas, they've been under a blockade and through war after war after war. And it can't continue. It really cannot continue like this. And of course, the people of the south, the Israelis in the south on the border region with Gaza have also been suffering for the last 14-15 years from endless rocket attacks, incendiary balloon attacks, and I can tell you, Jared, it's no picnic for kids growing up like that, from siren to siren, from war to war, from bomb shelter to bomb shelter, and seeing their land being burnt. I don't know how anyone wants to continue like that.
Well, I mean, that's part of why I say Netanyahu is a failed prime minister, because it just kept going.
Yeah,
he never actually solved anything.
Nothing.
Yeah,
nothing.
Like, It's like, yeah, you get to call yourself Mr. Security. Meanwhile, our children still grow up in fear and trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Like, in what way were you a successful leader? I'm sorry for bringing it back to Netanyahu. I'm just really upset at the guy.
No, but I think you're completely right, Jared. From the incitement that he led against Rabin in the 90s to what he's done in the 2000s, it's absolutely zilch. I think with anyone else in charge, the country would have progressed even more, and more great things were happening. The fact that Israel has become more of an economic powerhouse and business-wise and economy-wise, we're doing well. It's less to do with Bibi, and it's more to do with all the amazing people and citizens of Israel that we have contributing to the economy.
It's like the success of the country is not Netanyahu's. It belongs to the country, to the people who live there. He cut regulations in certain areas, and that helped. But the cutting of regulations didn't build the high tech in Tel Aviv. It didn't build the port in Haifa. It didn't build the industry. That was the people. That was Israelis, Jewish and Arab.
Exactly.
For our last 10 minutes, I want to ask you about something.
Sure.
All right, Ariel Sharon.
Mm-hmm.
If he didn't get that stroke, do you think we would be in a better position today, peace-wise?
It's a very, very tricky question, Jay.
Yeah.
It's a very tricky question, and it comes twofold. So, one, I think that we might have been in a better situation with regards to peace, because maybe he had some type of plan after the disengagement. We'll never know. Although, many people have said that the disengagement was to do with also steering attention away from his corruption and things that had gone on over there with his sons and I think it was Greece or Cyprus and hotel deals. I'm not exactly too sure on the details. So I don't know. One thing I can say about Ariel Sharon, he gave his whole life for the country, whether that was in the army or in government or in any position that he held. He really did everything with his whole heart. And, I think that at the end of the day, he was a much better leader than Bibi. So, yeah, I do think we would have been in a better situation if he didn't get that stroke. But of course, he did, and he lay in hospital for many years until he passed away, unfortunately.
Yeah, it was like 10 years, right, before they finally caught up with him.
Yeah, it was a long time. It was a long time. He was fighting like a real warrior that he was, for sure. Yeah. And just a little interesting fact is, I was speaking to a Palestinian buddy of mine, and he said that he wishes that the Palestinians had even one leader that was close to Ariel Sharon, which really says something. Yeah. That's literally what he said.
In what way? In like his toughness and his like determination to get a goal and go for it? Like,
yeah, I think that's the determination and the willingness to fight and continue to fight for what he believed in and for what he wanted. And unfortunately, on the Palestinian side, I'll speak from the heart here. I do think they have a huge lack of leadership and lack of moral leadership. Unfortunately, the Hamas are no good. Islamic Jihad are no good. Unfortunately, Abbas no good. So it really kind of is. For me, I think it's up to the younger Palestinian generation to, over the next decade, try and get more involved and try and make a change on the ground.
Yeah.
And that there will be opportunities for that. There will be opportunities.
Yeah, there will be once Abbas dies, because he's never leaving office. I honestly, I think the only way young Palestinians can actually take control is if they legit just rise up against the PA. That's about it. But that's a topic we're going to leave everybody on a cliffhanger for next time because we're running out of time here, fellas. So, and honestly, this was a good conversation. I wanted to go on for longer about the Ariel Sharon stuff because I was just interested in what you thought of that. But anyway, time to get ready.
It's been a good episode, Jared. It's nice to have you back, and good luck with your new journey over there in the States. For
I
the next
will.
couple of years.
I hope it'll be all right, but hold on, let me just adjust the sensitivity.
Of course it will. Thank you guys for tuning in. Remember to like, subscribe, comment, do all that jazz, and stick with us for the next episode coming up. We're going to have a midweek special, hopefully. So do stick with us. Thanks very much.
Yeah. Goodbye.